Hello, and welcome to Dear Future, where we dive into the spaces between reality and imagination. I am your host, Suki, and today we're taking a closer look at a project that asks us to rethink what's real, what is invented, and why it all matters. Our guest is Quim, the creator of an account called Fake is Real, an ongoing exploration into AI-driven portrait photography that feels, to me, startlingly lifelike, but is entirely artificial. Each portrait in his series is generated by AI, but what makes the project really special isn't just the imagery, but the personalities and the stories and histories that he embeds within each of the pieces and each of the sort of artificial people. Quim's work draws me into a space where AI doesn't just replicate human features, but creates fictional lives that makes me question my assumptions about identity and authenticity. Today, we're going to unpack what goes into crafting these hyper-real personalities, how storytelling shapes the emotional response to AI, and what Fake is Real reveals about the evolving role of artists in the age of algorithms. So if you've ever wondered how much of real is in the eye of the beholder, this one is for you.
This idea that everything's been done before can be challenged.
I've been dreaming of a computer like this my whole life.
It really made me think more about how our brains work.
It's not coming from anywhere else. It's only coming from us.
Dear Future. Quim, welcome to Dear Future.
That was such a nice introduction. Thank you so much. Very excited to be here with you.
And so I want to know a little bit more. You weren't always making AI portraits. How did you get your start in the creative world?
I started long ago, like maybe 20 years ago, and I started doing illustration. I wanted to be an architect because my dad is an architect, and I remember studying very hard to be able to get in, and didn't happen. I was like a couple of decimals behind the crossing line, but I think that was actually very good at the end because I started doing some stuff just in between, just because I was like having a little bit of time to figure out what I wanted to do. So I actually started studying illustration and graphic design, and suddenly I just loved it. I was having such a good time, and that's how I actually started a creative career. I did this first, then I studied in the university something called electronic arts, which is at the moment was like you would do from film to photography to web design. We would use a lot of Flash at that time, like ActionScript, Flash, and all these softwares that we don't have anymore with us. Also Arduino and installations and things like that. So it was very versatile, I would say, university studies. And then I started working first as a motion designer. I love After Effects. Is one of the softwares that I still love. And that was my first job as a motion designer. I worked at the television industry, nothing to do with advertising. I was doing cartoons for kids, basically, for 2 years, doing compositing with After Effects and animation and things like that. But I think now that I'm in the whole AI world, I think this really helped me being able to surf through all the AI stuff and like create new things and mix a little bit of this knowledge of more traditional tools, and maybe even like when you're saying like storytelling also, it's something that's been here forever, right? And mixing all this stuff that's more traditional that we already have with AI, I think it's what makes some of the work that we see out there great.
And what inspired you to make this account and this project, Fake is Real? Was there a moment of realization that sparked you or made you feel like, oh, I really want to work on portraits of people and I want to tell stories about these people?
I think I was working at Adidas and I discovered Midjourney. And I think it was like one of the first versions, like maybe 4 or something, or 3 or 4. And I started actually using it there for concepting to visualize ideas for decks for Adidas. And then I remember for one day, it suddenly came up with a nice result of a portrait. And I was like, oh, that's actually quite good. I could do something with these. And why don't I do more images of faces? And now we are in a level that you can't tell anymore. Before you could, but it's interesting because I started posting these portraits in the account. And I started getting messages from photographers or from other creatives asking me, what camera are you using? And is that the Neo, Sony, blah, blah, blah? People wouldn't have any idea. And you look at the images now and it's obviously AI, but I think we're also getting better in recognizing this. It's crazy how we are also getting trained at the same time visually to recognize this type of images. But at that moment, it was like a lot of people were a bit confused about the authenticity of those portraits. So I think that the first idea for me was, what can I say next to the image? I didn't just want to put the image out there and say like generated with blah, blah, blah. So I made up a story and that worked for me. It was like a nice package using these to say something. The story had some sort of like maybe meaning to me. And I found really interesting the fact that you could create these personas and put them out there and see what people think.
And when you were making these portraits and telling these stories, did you face any challenges balancing the artificial with the real? Like, were there moments where you would get a little bit tripped up, or did it still feel like storytelling the whole time?
For me, it was purely storytelling. It's true that it can get a little bit weird at some point, but for me, it was like a nice way of generating stories of people that could exist somewhere. Maybe also a way to travel somewhere else or imagine things. A nice way to bring some super short stories out there.
And you have an interesting background because you worked as an artistic director, you've worked at these larger companies. Can you tell me a little bit about how that experience has played out in this creative expression? Do you find that there's a lot of crossover? Do you find that they're actually quite distinct? And do you find that your history working as an artistic director has influenced your work that you're doing right now?
For sure, there's like a huge connection between the two worlds. I would even say like it's the same world. I think about stories for brands, and that's my own brand, if you want. It's easy for me to come up with these characters and these stories because it's something that I would do all the time since the beginning. Also, since like I was doing a cartoon in the TV, I think it's basically the same thing. For me, my creativity or my creative world is rooted in myself, in my upbringing, or like my personal experiences. And I think I draw everything that I love also from there. That's part of how I create and how I do it from my personal projects or also for brands, if there's projects for brands that allow that, of course, because sometimes it's just like make some pictures or like branding or something that has nothing to do with storytelling.
And it's interesting because there's sort of one world where you start to think about the characters that you're building and these identities that you're putting out into the world. With AI-generated faces and stories, there's still issues of representation and ethics. Yeah. Are there things that you consider or boundaries that you have that you're bringing into your creative work, regardless of whether they're real people or artificial?
I think for me, I'm especially interested in minorities, and I think that comes across in the type of people that I show. Also, very interested in mixing cultures and doing a blend of my experiences with what I see out there, imagining people that has some background that for me is super interesting culturally, for example, or maybe it doesn't go too deep in the shot itself or in the story itself. But if I do a little bit more introspection, I'm sure like there's a stuff like this that comes out in this type of work, like my interest in different cultures, different people, and people that maybe hasn't been portrayed yet. I love the beauty of people. Like I love to be able to portray in a beautiful way these characters. And I think sometimes it's like something that maybe I missed in our culture in general. Of course, now everything is not the same as when I was a kid or when I was studying, for example. But some of these concepts of like being able to portray people that maybe hasn't been portrayed in that manner. I also, for example, love aesthetics, fashion, styling. So it's always there in my work.
I actually started off in photo, and I wasn't sure whether I was going to do photojournalism or go more of the art photography route. But when you first get your camera and you're like, let's go out and take pictures and like, let's do it. And to the later stages where you really have like a small crew and you've got, I have a few friends who are actually really good at this and, holding a bounce for them when we go out to do editorial photos and things like that. And one of the things I'm always struck by with portrait photography, to capture a real moment with someone requires so much patience and waiting for the conditions to be right, but also a kind of directing that brings out intimacy and vulnerability. And with AI photography, AI portraiture, you're having to direct in a very different way. And I'm curious what your process has been like to get those expressions that feel really honest and not posed, but really introspective and almost catching these windows of people. Do you find that you have to direct them in a certain way when you're prompting, or do you see that they happen by chance?
That's a good question. I also love photography. I've always loved taking pictures of people. I think for me, in this AI exercise or project, it was more like trying to find this same soul in there, even if it's not existing, of course. Mm-hmm. But the fact that you could trick the eye and maybe bring a little bit of emotion or bring some sort of feeling was very interesting. In the process, there's a lot of luck. It's not that much about the prompting. In the prompts, I tried a lot of different things. Sometimes I also wrote stuff like very long. It's like they say, just don't do that, or be very specific. I tried a lot of different things. I also put text there from some books that I like, or some, random stuff, and put a character there. For me, there's something with AI, which is the unpredictability of it. And you need kind of to balance this control and unpredictability. You can control certain things, but then you get also some results. You can use, for example, chaos and stuff like this in Midjourney to make the AI hallucinate a little bit more, let's say. So that's on one side. And on the other side is having the eye to be able to select what you think is good. I did a lot of projects with AI, also for brands now. And I think this is kind of the core. You get results, you get images, but it's on you to decide what works and what not. And that's your eye, and that's your experience, your training. Basically, what I do is select the best, then do a lot of iterations on one or the other. It's a long time since I update the page. So if I would do it now, maybe I would use the editor at the end to tweak here and there. It's mostly this, like do a lot of generations, do a lot of work, let the AI go, and then do curation and select stuff that I like. That's been a big process, more than putting specific words or specific prompts. It's true that there's some technical camera prompts, or like there's some words, keywords that I can put there that maybe you can get a specific result. But it's mostly a lot of generations and then a lot of curation.
Would you say that in working with commercial clients now, you've noticed anything about the ways that your process differs with commercial clients or your own? And if so, how have you noticed that the world of commercial clients coming in and affecting the space of AI?
It's something completely different. There's so many points here, but like one of the most important for me, it's also about this control. And so clients are the same clients. It's not like we suddenly have clients that are in AI processes and they know about the technology. So they still want control over the images. And that's what's a little bit more challenging. For me, the more control you have, the more time you're going to spend on generating one image. I've been doing projects that are about scale, about, we need 1,500 images for this campaign. And we know that you can produce that with AI. That's possible, of course. The problem is when you start generating these images and you want a lot of control over these images, because that means that you spend more time on these images. And the idea of, this is going to be very cheap because we're doing it with AI. Yeah, it's true, maybe for certain cases, if you don't want too much control over what you're generating. The more control, the more money at the end is like the equation that I think it's a very simple kind of graphic, but I think it's very true in AI. There's a lot of processes where we're doing retouching after, for example, and this also takes a lot of time. I think it's been very different than like generating AI in a personal space or for personal projects.
And as someone who is adapting a lot of these different understandings to a commercial space in such a fresh way, what do you do to resist homogeneity and like everything looking the same? Because if everyone has access to the same tools, it's very easy for the work that you're generating, the work that you're creating to look all like the same variant of itself. And so what are the things that you do to make sure that your work stands out and has a voice and has a tone or something that you feel like you can stand behind?
I think, again, maybe it comes to being yourself, trying to do what you like. At the end, I do what I like. I have my references, I have my experiences, I have the things that happen in my daily life. That's so unique. Like no one else has this experience. And this happens with every one of us, right? When stuff starts to look so similar, I think it's a lot of times because of the technology, of course, because we're all using the same tools. But a lot of it, it's because we're just like executing stuff without getting maybe too deep into ourselves or into our references or into exploring a little bit more. I think that makes a lot of difference. And I can see it in work generated with AI, with a lot of people. Like you can do a fashion photography, like and put a nice jacket and a nice background, but there's so much of this. There's a lot of fantasy stuff that all smells the same way. And it's also because it's like, oh, this is just references that come from our culture, things that have been done before. And then you try to do the same thing, but with AI, try to do, I don't know, like a Star Wars scene and do it with AI, and try to do like a Toon Pixar style and do it with AI. And that's cool. It can be done, but I think it's much more interesting when you go back to yourself and do something that really resonates with what you
care about. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I guess as somebody who is watching the future of portrait photography be born, you said something about how it's interesting that the more we see these images, the more we are also trained to see the ways in which they are artificial. And I'm curious, how do you see AI influencing the future of portrait photography and fashion photography? And are there any specific ways that you hope AI transforms how we relate to this kind of art?
For me, portrait photography and what I'm doing, it just maybe different worlds. For me, this is more like storytelling through portraits, but I consider it more storytelling than portrait photography. I think like having someone real there, we won't be able to get to that point of power or empathy that you get with humans. I think it's very difficult. So I hope, we can keep both worlds existing separate and doing different things. If I think about brands, for example, I wouldn't recommend if they want to use someone. That happened in some of the projects that I've been working, but like, oh, can we train this athlete and do all his photography with AI, right? All his portraits, all his images. I think you lose a little bit of the intention of why are you having this person there somehow. And I'm sure with AI, we are able even today to generate emotions and connect with people for sure. One of the things that I find interesting, and one project I did just like portraits, but this moving image in black and white, which I think also helps getting even more close to the people. But I think it's very interesting when you can react very quick to things in the real world that are happening, and you have like your point of view and you want to express something interesting. It's a super powerful tool. Let me put this example of this project. A few months ago in the UK, there was this riots of racists against the mostly migrant population. But I was like, oh, this is like, it's very bad. And I wanted to do something about it. And I wanted to create some sort of film that showed the diversity of people in the UK. right? The best way to do that is to just go to the UK and film all these people, have them like for real there, right? But with AI, you can do basically what I did. I started creating portraits of different people, different races, cultures in the UK. But I first researched a little bit. So I looked at what communities were there, what communities were affected. I talked to friends that are from there. Well, I put all this information in the prompt. I put like the cities or like certain foods, or I put certain outfits and faces and stuff like this, right? And the result, it's very powerful and it connected with so many people. And these are not real people, but doesn't really matter because the story is connected to reality and it makes sense. Even if you see someone that's not real there, you can connect with the story, you can connect with what's happening, and you get the same message. These type of projects, I think there's a lot of power that we have in our hands with these tools. You can just like react and say things very quickly to things that are happening today, or topics that are interesting to you and things like that. So yeah, it gives me a lot of excitement and hope that we can work with these tools and generate things that can connect with people in a different way.
Has anything surprised you by working with these tools, maybe either in the use of them or in people's reactions to them? What would you say would be the most surprising thing that you've experienced since starting to use these tools?
The reach, maybe. I wasn't really expecting any reach. For example, I wasn't expecting be talking to you about these projects or this work. And I think that's what's great about these tools. You have so much power to create and it's so fast. Then you just like need to put it out there and see how people react to it. And for me, that's been like the most surprising side of it. The other side for me, it's like the speed of things are moving. Even in client decks, now I'm putting like, this is, I don't know if I put like a timeline or like a technique or how to, I've been doing like a lot of background swap now, right? And it's like, oh, can you do background swap of all these thousands of assets? And it's like, yes, I can do it in this time and it looks like this, but maybe next month we can do it in half the time and it can look much better. That's like super surprising, a little bit overwhelming also maybe. But it's crazy in the speed that we're moving now. Runway, for example, been so busy that I have like these steps there because I just like really open in my browser. I really want to try this character lip sync and like the camera movements. I was waiting for the character lip sync and then I haven't tried it yet. And now we have already the camera movements and it's just so quick. So that's also something that I think it's surprising to me, the speed how we're moving.
And do you have any technical advice that you would give to people that are maybe getting started or don't even know where to start? Either tips and tricks or just advice you would give to those people who are just starting out and curious about the kind of work you're doing and wanting to make work like you're making right now?
Yes. I started with Midjourney. I know that like now I have Comfy UI and like I have all these tools and it's cool, but I think my playground is still Midjourney. Somehow, maybe even start with like the Discord app. I don't know, but like something simple. You can start with any of these more accessible tools. For me, Midjourney is one of the powerful ones aesthetically because it's kind of based on aesthetics somehow. You can try so many things, experiment in different ways in a very easy way. It's easy to understand. It's easy to use. And I would just like start from putting there things that you imagine, things that you want to see. I think the beauty of this is like you can type something and get an image as a result. I know that's been a while, but it's quite cool, right? So I think for people that never tried, I think that's the best way. Just type something, get something, and then just like continue and experiment. And I always try to keep it within my world. And I think that's helped making something a little bit more personal.
Is there anything that you would say this project speaks to around authenticity today? Just the title, I have to talk about it, like fake is real. Like, is there any type of commentary that you're making on society or anything that you feel this kind of an account is making about society in this era where, digital manipulation and AI are becoming so mainstream and so easy to access?
I think the name is already commenting.
Tell me more.
I think it's very interesting, the unknown space where we are going. And I think we just need to be, for example, like there's a whole topic about like the database or where like the use of this database to generate images. I totally understand that point. I think there's a lot of conversations like how will this evolve? What does it mean for us, for the industry? How conscious are we of what we are doing? What happens with photography? What's the role of photography? How this is going to change for the industry, for art? Like there's so many open questions. And I think all of these questions seem interesting to me. I think Fake is Real. It kind of talks about all these topics. The role of AI, what will happen when we have people talking to us in the news or in films and it's not real people. Can we still feel something? Can we still be connected, even if there's no human?
It's beautiful. Thank you for exploring it in your work and bringing it to the world so that we can all reflect on it and balance it out with our own decisions. And I want to finish up with one last very, very short exercise. If you could send a message to the future, what would it be? And it's literally starting with Dear Future. How would you finish this sentence if you were communicating with the future?
Dear future, let us keep creating beautiful stuff.
Mwah, beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Thank you to all of our listeners for joining us in this exploration of reality and art and technology. Quim, it's been very eye-opening to hear how Fake is Real has evolved and how you yourself as an artist have evolved. Thank you to Echo Bend for hosting us and for producing this amazing podcast. It would not be doing this without you all. To everyone listening, please be sure to follow Fake is Real for stories and faces and inspiration that provokes and inspires and makes us rethink authenticity. Until next time, please keep exploring the unknown, please stay curious, and please remember that sometimes the most powerful truths can emerge from what is not real. This is Dear Future, signing off. Thank you for joining us.
Dear Future.